Disclaimer: this story is based on true events and personal experiences. It is meant to share an honest perspective on complex emotions and situations. Viewer discretion is advised. He brought 50 Shades to life, and I went along for the ride. At first, it seemed like something out of a movie, like the kind of story you only hear whispered about or see dramatized on screen. But this wasn't fiction. It was my reality, and it unfolded in ways I never expected. I never thought I'd be the one caught in the middle of a secret so intense, so charged with excitement and danger, that it blurred the lines between what was right and what was thrilling. It all started innocently enough, with a spark of curiosity and the thrill of something new. The man I was involved with had a way of pulling me into his world, a world that felt like a mix of romance, power, and mystery. He wasn't like anyone I had ever met before. There was something magnetic about him, something dark but enticing, and suddenly I found myself stepping into a story that mirrored the intensity of 50 Shades, the book and movie everyone talks about but few experience in real life. I knew the risks. I knew the lines we were crossing. But every moment with him felt electric, as if we were characters in a dangerous game where passion and secrets danced hand in hand. It wasn't just about the excitement. It was about the way he made me feel alive, wanted, and powerful in ways I hadn't felt before. And yet, beneath that rush, there was always a shadow of doubt and guilt, a reminder that this wasn't just a fantasy, it was infidelity. The situation wasn't simple. It was tangled in lies, stolen moments, and the quiet fear of being found out. The man I was with was married. His life was built on a foundation of trust and promises to someone else, and I was the secret that threatened to pull it all apart. But the more time I spent with him, the harder it became to stop. The allure of this hidden world was too strong, and I was trapped in the thrill and heartbreak of it all. I remember one particular night when everything felt like it was about to unravel. We were together, wrapped up in the intensity of the moment, when suddenly the weight of what we were doing crashed down on me. The line between fantasy and reality blurred, and I realized how deep I had gone. What started as a secret game had become a powerful force that could destroy more than just our own lives. It could hurt the people we cared about, the families we were a part of, and the futures we once dreamed of. But walking away wasn't easy. The pull was too strong, and every time I tried to stop, something brought me back. Whether it was his charm, the passion, or the simple human desire to feel connected and alive, I found myself tangled in a story much bigger than me. A story about love, betrayal, and the dangerous edge between fantasy and reality. This isn't just a story about cheating. It's about the emotions that come with it, the confusion, the guilt, the excitement, and the pain. It's about what happens when someone brings a fantasy to life, and you realize too late that the price might be higher than you imagined. It's about the choices we make when our hearts and minds are pulled in opposite directions, and the consequences that follow. I'm sharing this because I want you to understand the full picture, the messy, complicated, real story behind the headlines and whispers. What happened between us changed everything. It tested my limits, my beliefs, and forced me to look at myself in a way I never wanted to. And even now, the story isn't over. There are moments when I question everything, why I stayed, what I wanted, and if it was all worth it. So, if you think you know what this story is about, think again. It's not just about infidelity or a dangerous affair. It's about the human side of it all, the feelings that make us do things we never thought possible, and the consequences we have to face when the fantasy fades and reality sets back in. And now, as I sit here telling you this, I'm left wondering what happens next. Will this secret tear us apart? Or will the promise of something more keep us holding on even when everything is at stake? The answers aren't clear yet. But one thing is certain. This ride is far from over. Stay with me because the next part of this story will reveal the moments that changed everything and the difficult choices that followed. You won't want to miss how this real-life 50 Shades tale unfolds and the truth behind what happens when desire and betrayal collide. He was a man who seemed to have it all, a successful career, a charming smile, and a confidence that made people notice him wherever he went. When we first met, I thought he was just another guy passing through my life. But there was something different about him, something that pulled me in without warning. It wasn't just his looks or the way he spoke. It was the way he made me feel like I mattered, like I was the only person in the room. And maybe that's why I didn't stop myself from getting involved. Our conversations started casual, lighthearted even, but soon they deepened into something more intense. He shared pieces of his life that no one else knew, the frustrations, the dreams he kept hidden, and the secrets he carried behind closed doors. It was during those moments that I caught glimpses of the man beneath the surface, the one tangled in a life I couldn't be part of, but was drawn to all the same. He told me about his marriage, not in detail, but enough to know it was complicated. There were cracks in their relationship, things left unsaid, and wounds barely healed. I wanted to believe he was unhappy, that what we were doing was harmless in comparison to the emptiness he felt at home. Maybe I was trying to convince myself more than him, but that was the story I clung to, even as the lines blurred and the guilt grew heavier. We started meeting in secret places, each encounter more charged than the last. Every stolen moment felt like a rebellion against the ordinary, a plunge into a world where rules didn't apply and desire ruled everything. The 50 Shades fantasies he brought to life weren't just about excitement. They were a way to escape the realities we both wanted to forget. He was the man in control, and I was the willing participant, even when my heart screamed that this was dangerous. But the danger wasn't just in the thrill of the affair. It was in the quiet moments afterward, when the adrenaline faded and the real world crept back in. I found myself watching my phone, waiting for messages that might never come. I questioned every decision, wondering if this was worth the risk, or if I was simply fooling myself with the idea of something more. The tension between what I wanted and what I knew was right was suffocating. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of his other life. Photos on social media, mentions of family dinners, or quick excuses that didn't quite add up. It was like living two parallel stories, one where I was the center of his attention, and another where I was nothing more than a secret. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on me, but I didn't walk away. I was trapped, caught between the excitement of the forbidden and the ache of betrayal. There were nights when I wondered what his wife must think, what she would say if she knew. Did she sense something was wrong? Did she question the distance growing between them? Those thoughts filled me with guilt and shame, but they also pushed me deeper into the story. I was part of something messy and real, something that wasn't black and white but shaded with doubt and desire. What made it even harder was how he talked about the future. Not the one he had with his wife, but a different future, one that included me. It was confusing and painful to hear promises that felt so real yet were built on lies. I didn't know if he believed them himself, or if they were just words to keep me close. But I wanted to believe in that future, even if it was just a fragile hope in a world full of uncertainty. The closer I got to him, the more I realized how much I didn't know. There were sides of his life he kept hidden, parts of himself that never surfaced in our conversations. Sometimes I'd catch him staring off into the distance, lost in thought, and I wondered what demons he was fighting. Was it guilt? Fear? Or something else entirely? It made me realize that our story was only one piece of a much bigger puzzle, a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to be part of, but couldn't seem to leave behind. The days turned into weeks, and the secret affair became an undercurrent in my life, something I had to hide from friends, family, even myself. The tension built with every meeting, every text, every whispered promise. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between pleasure and pain, between hope and heartbreak. And the closer we got to crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, the more I wondered if this story would end in love, destruction, or something I couldn't even imagine yet. One evening, everything changed. A message arrived that shook me to my core, one that threatened to expose the secret world we had built. Suddenly, the fantasy felt more real than ever, and the risks were no longer abstract. I was forced to face the truth that no matter how much I wanted this to work, the consequences were closing in fast. The man who brought 50 Shades to life was no longer just my secret lover. He was a storm on the horizon, and I was caught right in the middle. I want to tell you what happened next, but the story is far from over. The choices we make in moments like these define everything that follows, and the road ahead is uncertain. So hold on, because the ride is just getting started, and the truth behind this real-life tale of desire and betrayal is about to unfold in ways I never saw coming. After that message, everything changed in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just a text. It was a reminder that what we had wasn't some private bubble protected from the outside world. The risk wasn't just about feelings anymore. It was about being exposed, having our secret ripped open in a way that could ruin lives. My heart pounded every time my phone lit up, each notification a new wave of anxiety. Was it him? Was it her? Or someone else who'd caught onto the truth? He started acting different too. The confident, in-control man I knew began slipping. Hesitant glances, missed calls, conversations cut short. The tension between us grew thicker, like a storm brewing right over our heads. I wanted to reach out, to ask what was happening, but I was scared of the answers. The more I pushed, the more he pulled away, and I realized I was no longer just a player in this story. I was caught in the crossfire of something far bigger. There was the other side of this affair I hadn't fully seen before, the wife. I never met her, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? Did she know or suspect? Sometimes I'd catch myself imagining her as the woman who once trusted him completely, unaware that her life was unraveling. It made me feel like the villain, even though part of me believed she was also trapped in her own quiet misery. I wondered if she had moments when she felt the distance growing between them, or if she was just waiting for something to break the silence. Meanwhile, his world outside of me felt like a shadow I couldn't step into. I knew he had responsibilities, family dinners, social circles that kept up appearances no matter what was really going on. It made the affair feel like a secret theater performance, with me as the hidden audience member. Every time he disappeared without explanation or came back with tired eyes, I realized how complicated his life was, how much he was juggling, and how fragile this secret really was. But there was another side to me in all this, the part one barely admitted even to myself. I wasn't just caught in his story, I had my own reasons for staying. Maybe it was loneliness, or the craving for connection in a world that often felt cold and distant. Maybe it was the chance to feel desired, to be part of something exciting, even if it was wrong. And maybe, deep down, I hoped that this affair could somehow lead to something real, something that made sense of all the chaos. The nights we spent together became moments of escape, but the silence afterward was deafening. I'd lie awake, thinking about the lies we told and the truth we buried under layers of passion. The guilt crept in quietly, a constant reminder that this wasn't just a harmless fling, it was a betrayal, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then, out of nowhere, a new complication arrived. Someone from his past resurfaced, a person with their own history in his life, someone who wasn't just a memory, but a threat to everything we had. Their sudden appearance brought more secrets, more questions, and more tension. It was as if the walls were closing in, and the perfect storm was ready to break. This new development made me realize that the story wasn't just about the two of us anymore. There were other players, other pieces moving in the shadows. It made me wonder how much I really knew about him and how many parts of his life he was still hiding. The lines between friend, enemy, and stranger blurred, and I was caught right in the middle, unsure who to trust, unsure what to believe. Every day felt like walking on thin ice. One wrong move could shatter everything, the secret, the fragile trust, and the tangled emotions that held us together. But despite the danger, I couldn't bring myself to step back. The pull was too strong, and the story too compelling. I was living a real-life drama where desire, deception, and danger collided, and the end was nowhere in sight. What would happen next? Would the truth come crashing down on us, or could we somehow keep this fragile world from falling apart? I didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a story about infidelity. It was about the messy, complicated choices we make when our hearts and minds are torn in different directions. And I was still right in the middle of it, with no clear way out. The days that followed felt like living on a knife's edge. Every phone call, every message, carried a weight I couldn't shake. The new person from his past was no longer just a shadow. They were a real threat, pushing their way into the story in ways that made my skin crawl. I could feel the tension building like a storm ready to break, but no one knew exactly when or how. And in the middle of it all, I was left trying to hold on to what little control I had. He became more distant, his words clipped and his eyes tired. The man who once brought 50 Shades to life had started to crumble, and the secret we shared felt like it was pulling us both under. I wanted to confront him, to demand honesty, but every time I tried, the fear of what I might uncover stopped me. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the fall would destroy me or somehow set me free. I kept asking myself, how long could we keep this hidden? How many lies would it take before everything fell apart? The guilt gnawed at me, but the fear was worse, the fear of losing him, the fear of being exposed, the fear of what would happen if the truth came out. And beneath all that was a strange, almost desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this storm could pass without total destruction. But the cracks were growing. Secrets slipped out in moments I least expected. A careless glance from someone who suspected. A text message left unread but not unnoticed. I started to see the walls closing in, tightening around us like a noose. The danger was no longer just about being caught. It was about how far we were willing to go to protect what we had, even if it meant hurting the ones we loved most. The nights became restless, filled with questions I couldn't answer. Was this the beginning of the end, or just another twist in a story that refused to be simple? I knew the moment of truth was coming, whether we were ready for it or not, and when it did, everything would change. The ride wasn't over. It was about to get a lot more real. Just when I thought the tension couldn't get any worse, everything shifted in a way I never saw coming. One evening, as I sat waiting for his call, nervous, heart pounding, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, a sick feeling twisting in my stomach. The message was simple but chilling. I know everything. My mind raced. Who could it be? The wife? The person from his past? Or someone else, someone watching from the sidelines, ready to pull the thread that would unravel it all? That message changed everything. Suddenly, the secret we had fought so hard to keep was no longer just between the two of us. It was out there, lurking in the shadows, threatening to expose the whole affair. The walls that had held our hidden world together were cracking faster than I could patch them. I wanted to believe it was a bluff, but the fear in my gut told me otherwise. I tried to talk to him, to find out what was happening, but he was distant, more closed off than ever. There were moments when I caught him staring at his phone, eyes dark with worry, and I knew this was bigger than me, bigger than us. I realized I was a small piece in a much larger, messier puzzle, and no matter how much I wanted to control the story, the truth was slipping through my fingers. Then came the other shock. A mutual friend, someone I trusted, pulled me aside one day and dropped a bombshell. "You need to know," they said, voice low. "He's not just hiding an affair. There's something else going on, something dangerous." That sentence hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. What else could be worse than this? What secret was so dark it threatened everything? I was caught between fear and curiosity, desperate for answers, but scared of what I might find. The stakes had risen beyond anything I imagined, and the story I thought I knew was twisting into something far more complicated. I was trapped in a web of desire, betrayal, and secrets that seemed impossible to escape. The countdown to the inevitable was on, and the question was no longer if the truth would come out, but when, and what would be left in the aftermath. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, but I felt the weight of the secret suffocating me more than ever. Then, out of nowhere, his wife showed up at my door. Her eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and anger I hadn't expected. She didn't yell or accuse, she just stood there, quiet but strong, and told me everything. She had known about the affair for months. But what shook me most was what came next. She wasn't just hurt, she was planning something that would change everything. I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about power, control, and the desperate fight to hold on to what was left. The person from his past wasn't just a threat, they were part of a plan to expose him, to force him to choose. And the message, the warning that someone knew everything, that was only the beginning. Secrets I thought were mine alone were suddenly out in the open, and the fragile world we built was collapsing fast. He confronted me that night, his face a storm of regret and fear. For the first time, I saw the man behind the mask, the one caught between the life he wanted and the life he'd built. We talked, really talked, about everything. The lies, the desires, the pain. But the truth was clear, nothing could stay hidden forever. Just when I thought I had reached the end, the final twist hit. The message wasn't a threat from the wife or the past, it was from someone even closer. Someone I never suspected, someone who had been watching the whole time, ready to pull the strings and change the story forever. And that's where the ride truly begins. The revelation that the message came from someone so close to me shook me to the core. It was a reminder that sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from strangers, but from those we least expect. I had spent so much energy worrying about the obvious threats that I never saw the real danger right beside me. It forced me to look at everything differently, not just the affair, but the people around me and the choices I'd made. In the days that followed, things began to unravel, but in a way that brought clarity rather than chaos. The man I had fallen for had to face the consequences of his actions, just as I had to face my own. We both had to make difficult decisions, to accept the parts of ourselves that weren't perfect, and to learn from the mess we'd created. The affair was over, but the lessons stayed with me, the complexities of desire, the weight of secrets, and the cost of betrayal. I won't pretend it was easy, or that everything was wrapped up neatly. Life rarely is. But I found strength in the truth, even when it hurt. I realized that sometimes going along for the ride means facing the ride's end with honesty and courage. It's about accepting the messy, complicated realities of human relationships and knowing that growth often comes from the hardest moments. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. Behind every secret, there's a story worth understanding. And sometimes, the most important journey is learning to forgive yourself, even when the ride has been rough. 6.